Okay, 1 minute past, so I think we'll get started and let people keep flowing in the background. So, hi everyone. Thank you very much for giving up your time and joining this lunchtime masterclass session today, which is being hosted by the NIHR School for Primary Care Research. My name is Hallie. I'm the Public Involvement and Engagement Manager for the school, and I'm going to be helping to chair the session today. Just before I introduce our speaker, just a reminder that today's session is going to be recorded. This will go on the school's YouTube channel shortly after, so we can make sure it reaches as many people as possible. Because of just the number involved, we have camera and microphones deactivated to help minimize background noise. So please do use the chat function to ask any questions or make any comments throughout. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat as well, it might just be helpful to know who we've got in the room today as well. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation, so I'll keep an eye on the chat to feed these in at the end. And as well, if you would prefer to ask the question yourself rather than put it in the chat, do just raise your hand and we can try and unmute you so you can ask that yourself. So I'm really excited about today's speaker. We have Dr. Sarah Griffiths, who is a Senior Research Fellow at UCL, to share more about the Let's Talk Dementia project. So this is a project that was funded through the School for Primary Care Research Public Involvement Fund back in 2024. And it was a project that we really wanted to support because at the heart of it, it was really this drive to respond to a clear problem, which is that people with dementia remain underrepresented in research. So we're very excited to hear more about the project and the collaborative approach that Sarah and the team have taken. And I think she's got a few outputs to share with us as well. So Sarah, I'll hand it over to you for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hallie, and hi everyone. As Hallie said, I'm a senior dementia researcher with a background in speech and language therapy, and I'm based at University College London. We had planned for Martin, the PPI lead on this, to be present today, but sadly circumstances have meant that he can't be. He is part of this presentation though via a pre-recorded video we've done, which I'll play later. He'll also be happy to answer your questions in the chat afterwards if we collect them up for him. So we're going to talk about our project to develop advice on communication strategies for researchers involving people with dementia as public contributors in research, and our experiences of co-production as well. I'm going to use the term patient and public involvement, or PPI, throughout this talk to describe this type of involvement, although I'm aware that this terminology is gradually shifting now towards working with people and communities. And I'll refer to some useful sources and further reading as we go along, and some links will be posted in the chat afterwards. So dementia is a global issue affecting millions of people and families, and research is essential to improve care, support quality of life, and guide better services and policy. But people with dementia are poorly represented in research. We often focus on underrepresentation in terms of research participants, but it also applies to contributor roles, the people who collaborate with researchers to help design and guide research. And that matters because involvement at that level is one of the main ways research becomes more relevant and inclusive, so that it reflects the real needs and priorities of the people that it's intended to serve. But people with dementia often experience communication changes linked to cognitive, language, sensory, and speech difficulties. And these can create real barriers to public involvement, which often relies on things like reading documents, expressing views verbally or in writing, and participating in often quite fast-paced meetings and discussions. So as a result, researchers can find it difficult to recruit and retain PPI contributors across the lifetime of a project, even though people with dementia have a great deal to contribute. There's a clear need to better anticipate and support communication needs so that contributors can stay involved for as long as they choose to and are able to. So researchers need more practical knowledge about effective person-centered communication in PPI. Groups like the Dementia Engagement and Empowerment Project, or DEEP, and also Naomi Morley and colleagues in Exeter have been sort of co-producing resources to support public involvement with people with dementia. But detailed research on specific communication strategies is still quite limited and has often excluded people with dementia themselves. So the aim of this project was to co-produce an instructional video together with people with dementia and their supporters. And the idea was that the video would focus on communication strategies that support meaningful involvement of people with dementia in research as public contributors. And this might involve things like how best to use images, objects, and written words to support involvement, and how to support communication in remote meetings. The idea was to design this for two audiences, really. Primarily for researchers to build skills and confidence in dementia PPI, but also we wanted contributors themselves to look at this. The idea was that they would engage with the video, which would enable them to see what researchers should be doing to support them, which in turn could empower them to express and negotiate their communication needs with researchers. So the overall goal was to make involvement more accessible and to support longer-term engagement. So we had a fantastic team, and Martin Robertson and Manoj Mistry, a person with dementia and a supporter, both have vast experiences of PPI work. Rachel Litherland from the Innovations in Dementia and the DEEP Network helped us recruit people with dementia and their supporters and share the video once we'd produced it. And Rasmus is a professional designer with a track record of producing visually engaging resources for dementia projects. And then us researchers from UCL brought our expertise in dementia research, communication, and involving underserved groups in research. So before going into the details of the project, it's worth thinking about what co-production is and what it could mean in dementia research. Co-production is something that's talked about a lot, but it's actually defined in many different ways, which can make it feel a bit confusing at first. Broadly, it means people from different backgrounds and areas of expertise working together to shape a project, rather than the project being done on behalf of the people it's supposed to benefit. I really like this description of co-production as a kind revolution, because at its heart, it's about working towards building relationships and being inclusive and humane. Like with other groups, for people with dementia, relationships, communication, and trust really matter. You'll often hear related terms like co-design, co-creation, and co-research, lots of different co-words. These tend to overlap and aren't always used consistently, so it's not always about the label, it's more about the principles behind the approach. And across different guidance, there's quite strong agreement on what good co-production should involve. So shared dialogue and decision-making, respect for lived experience, building relationships over time, reciprocity, or everyone gets something out of it, and being flexible and reflective as a team as the project develops. One important clarification is that co-production doesn't mean perfect equality in the sense that everyone has the same role or does the same tasks. That's something researchers often worry about. What it really means is that people bring different and unique skills, perspectives, and forms of knowledge, and that everyone has a voice and feels their contribution is valued. The goal is meaningful involvement, not identical involvement. And one person with dementia that I worked with described this as reaching a critical mass, where each person brings something distinctive, and together those combined talents create something stronger than any individual contribution alone. So we recruited 6 people with dementia and 6 supporters of people with dementia who were family members. So what I'm showing here was intended to be a flexible timeline. While we couldn't move too far from this original plan because it was really carefully costed, we did make some important adjustments along the way. For example, most participants attended not 3 but 4 workshops. We also added a 5th workshop for the people with dementia as it became clear this was needed to complete the work well. We held separate workshops for people with dementia and supporters. The first workshops were held in person with time for refreshments, which was important for relationship building, and then later meetings moved online. And between workshops, I worked closely with the design Erasmus, taking ideas from the group into each design iteration, and then bringing drafts back for feedback. You'll see here that the timeline suggests that the video would be finalized in October, but actually, in reality, it wasn't finished until December, which is a really good reminder of the importance of building in flexibility when co-producing resources. Alongside the workshops, we also made a deliberate effort to broaden engagement, sharing the work through the Deep newsletter and inviting input via email. I managed to visit existing dementia PPI groups as well and speak with people with different types of dementia, including primary progressive aphasia, where communication difficulties are often the main and earliest change, which was particularly important given this project's focus on communication. In the first workshop, we focused on getting everyone on the same page about the project's main focus. We clarified that the project was about communication in public involvement in research, and importantly, what we actually mean by communication. And we spent quite a bit of time focusing on that to make sure we were all on the same page. Because although communication is a word we use all the time, people often mean quite different things when they talk about communication. So we asked contributors to reflect on the different meanings it might have for them, and then used those reflections to discuss the elements of communication shown here. Crucially, we worked on making sure contributors understood this wasn't just about communication in dementia in very general terms. We explained that there's a lot of advice out there on general communication tips for dementia. What we're interested in is communication specifically for doing PPI. And this kind of getting on the same page needed to be revisited at several points during the project. In the first workshops, we asked, what are your good and bad experiences of communication in PPI meetings? Think about in-person meetings and remote meetings, how researchers help people with dementia to understand things in meetings, and researchers making it easier for people with dementia to communicate in meetings. And then we asked, what are your top communication tips for researchers doing PPI work with people who have dementia? Emily and I ran those first in-person workshops together, and Emily made reams of notes. There were so many ideas. I then needed to collate and sort the ideas into a summary document to share with the contributors. As I did this, it became clear that there were too many ideas to do justice to in the 5 to 6 minute video we'd planned, and I didn't want those ideas to be lost. We therefore agreed an adaptation, working with the designer to produce detailed written guidance for researchers, alongside a video focusing on selected top tips chosen by contributors. Everyone was happy with this new direction, although it involved some budget adjustments and compromises, including the video being simpler than originally envisaged, with a more kind of pared back visual style and less animation. But this allowed us to focus on clarity and content rather than visual complexity. This is what the written guidance first page looks like, and you can find it along with the video on the link here when you get the slides, or it will be posted in the chat. And here are some examples of recommendations that don't appear in the video but are in the written guidance. Recognize the importance of silence, getting comfortable with long pauses. It's really important to give people time to process what's been said and construct a response. Being aware of fluctuations. It's helpful to check whether people are having a good or difficult day for communication. If showing video or audio clips, speed controls could be used to slow things down to the preferred pace of contributors, which should always be done in discussion with them. And some people, for instance those with primary progressive aphasia, find it easier to understand what people are saying if they have access to lip reading. So it's important to make sure people are not obscuring their mouths with their hands. There were some strong examples of co-production throughout the project. One of the people with dementia came up with the project name, Let's Talk Dementia. Before that, we had a very long, probably overly academic working title that I honestly can't even remember now. And everyone agreed that the new name was fitting for the project. One of our contributors with dementia, Phil, provided the voiceover for the video. This photo shows him in the speech lab during recording. It was a real pleasure working with him and shaping the voiceover together. And the workshops themselves were genuinely fun. There was a lot of banter and laughter, sometimes so much it was hard to get a word in edgeways, which I hope says a lot about how comfortable and engaged people felt. I'll now show the Let's Talk Dementia video, followed by the video of Martin talking about his reflections.
Let's Talk Dementia. Supporting communication in research partnerships involving people with dementia. We are a group of people with dementia, our supporters and researchers. We've created guidance on how to communicate when involving people with dementia in research. Dementia affects everybody differently. Communication needs vary, so avoid assumptions and stay flexible. Here are our top 10 communication tips from people with dementia to researchers. Building trust is key. Trust should be established before you start discussing the research. Speaking to new people can be hard for some of us, causing anxiety or embarrassment. Before the first meeting, have a chat with each person to learn how best to support their communication needs. Start and end meetings with time for informal chat. Icebreakers, like everyone talking about their favourite food, can help build confidence in speaking. But if they're not popular, just spark conversation around shared interests. This can help ease the conversation into the research. Remind us what the project is about at the start of each meeting. Don't assume we have remembered. We may need a memory jog, and then we are away. Being excited about your project might make you speak too fast. We often need extra time to process information, so slow the pace, but not too much. Overly slowing the pace or exaggerating your tone of voice can sometimes come across as demeaning. Some of us have speech difficulties. If someone gets stuck mid-sentence, give them time and do not jump in. Others may like a gentle prompt, like repeating the start of what they had said. Remember that individual preferences vary. Give us space to join in without pressure. Check if we find it helpful to use "I want to speak" cards. Some of us need time to build up confidence to speak. Encouragements help. Try asking, "Would anyone like to add something?" or go around the group so everyone has a chance. But don't push. No one should be forced to speak. Consider using a range of communication tools to support us to understand things and express ourselves. Use of gestures, drawing, images, and objects can all help us keep focused on the purpose of the discussion. Even meeting agendas can include images to illustrate activities. Keep presentations short and simple. A simple graphic is clearer than lots of words. Avoid using animations, as words and images appearing, moving or disappearing can be very confusing. You should also avoid speaking too much when showing slides. Do not use acronyms or technical words. We can fixate on trying to work out what things mean and therefore miss much of the conversation. Be mindful of body language. Too many gestures can be distracting and make it harder for us to concentrate. However, simple, purposeful gestures can support understanding, such as pointing, miming, writing to reinforce, write down your ideas, or using a thumbs up to show agreement. Like the pace and tone, be careful not to overdo gestures. They should feel natural, not exaggerated or childlike. Seeing people's faces is very important for helping us to understand what is being discussed. For this reason, in online meetings, try to limit screen sharing and avoid turning cameras off. There is always more to learn when it comes to communicating well. Regularly ask us for feedback on how well you have supported communication. Use the feedback for continued learning. This video was created by researchers at UCL in collaboration with people with dementia and their supporters. For more information, please see our written guidance or contact Sarah Griffiths. Let's talk.
So now it's time to hear Martin's reflections on being involved in the project, the resources themselves, and his thoughts on co-production.
We do research because we want to keep our brains stimulated.
Yeah.
We don't want to use, we don't want you to use infantile language. However, equally, we don't want you to use strange acronyms. And we felt that it was vital that a project such as this was created so that you could easily look at it and learn. We had to keep in mind it wasn't meant for us as an audience. However, it was meant for academics. So that was a bit hard to get our head around, or at least a bit hard for me to get my head around. But I think we got there. It was obviously mainly online. However, I do feel it's very important that you have a relationship, if that's the right word, with the academic. And I was very fortunate in that Sarah Griffiths got money to come and see me all the way in Aberdeen a long time ago, 2 years ago now. But I still feel that there's a relationship there, and that personal one-to-one, actually in the same room, if you like, is very important. So there is funding available for that sort of meeting, and you should take it. Online meetings can be quite hard, especially for someone like me. As you can see, I have to close my eyes if I'm talking.
Yeah.
So I quite often butt in when someone else has got a hand up because I don't see it. So I have to be politely reminded. But the actual rapport between us all was pretty good. The researcher has to allow us to be ourselves, otherwise you won't capture the real experiences that we have. And that goes back to the researcher knowing the people having this relationship, either hopefully in person or else a meeting before, a pre-meet, if you like, one-to-one with each person, so they can learn their difficulties, like my eyes going closed or things like that. All that needs to be discussed before the meeting. And the product, the written material is very useful, and it's up there for you to keep, if you like, by your side, to kind of keep referring back to. The video is also good because it shows you in real time. I'm not sure what was the right word. What we're trying to say, like keep graphs, keep diagrams simple, and the seating arrangements and things like that. That was all shown in the video, so it was all well co-produced. Sarah kept in line and was able to give the graphic creator what our words, and it came out. I think it came out very, very well. As I say, if you create the relationship, you have to give a little of yourself, but we'll give a lot more back, and it will give you a lot more information and in-depth experiences for you to use in your research. It does take time, but the time is well worth it. If you meet one person with dementia, you meet one person with dementia. None of us are the same. Even if we have the same dementia and we're at the same stage, it will be different. And there are, especially someone such as myself, there's only 500 folk with my dementia in the UK. So you have to, if I tell you I've got posterior cortical atrophy, I would expect the researcher to look it up and find out a bit about it and then ask me for my experiences of it. We often have what are termed foggy days. So sometimes you might have to wait a couple of days and put off an appointment, put off a meeting with us. And as we are co-producers, we can decide how much we wish to do. And often the kind of, for instance, I like doing a lot and other people just like doing little, but that's up to us. And we must never forget that we are giving the researcher a lot of emotional information, so the researcher themselves will get emotional, but he or she has to remain professional, and they should really have a background so that they can go and offload onto someone, because we can offload onto our partner if we've got one or something. So we have to keep that in mind when we're discussing points.
So you can tell I edited the conversation that Martin and I have for this, but you'll be pleased to know that he approved those edits. We collected some verbal feedback from the contributors, which you can see here. Overall, they felt valued, heard, and included throughout the process. They appreciated early and meaningful involvement and strong communication. The project was described as flexible, with early in-person meetings for those that could attend seen as really important. And the group also expressed that the project challenged assumptions about dementia and demonstrated that people with dementia can actively contribute to research. However, feedback highlighted the need for diversity and participation. One thing we should try to change is that it's always the same pool of people coming to these types of meetings. That's not the fault of the project, but something we could highlight and work to change as a group. It's true that there are a pool of contributors who are very active in dementia research and have become very experienced at PPI and will often respond to recruitment calls. And that's really great, but this pool of people needs to expand for PPI to be grounded in everyday experiences and also to be sustainable. Part of the reason for this project is to try and help that happen by making sure people with dementia engage with what we produce and as a result feel like there will be enough support for them to give PPI a go. I think it's going to involve more than that to happen, but it's a start. So I'm going to build on some of the reflections that we've already heard and share a few learning points of my own. One of the challenges was trying to balance two audiences. The primary audience was researchers, but as I said, we also wanted people with dementia to be able to engage with the resources. And that's quite a hard brief. Interestingly, some contributors with dementia felt that the simplicity of the video wasn't a problem. In fact, they liked that it modeled the kind of clear, straightforward communication we're trying to encourage researchers to use. The people with dementia and supporters involved had direct experience of PPI. However, not all supporters had experience of taking part in PPI alongside people with dementia, which meant that reflections within the supporter workshop sometimes varied greatly. And this was important learning for us. And in future, we would think carefully about the experiences that supporters bring in relation to the specific focus of the work. A broader point around this that we have in our guidance is that researchers should reflect on whether a project needs supporters to be involved at all. Living with dementia and supporting someone with dementia are very different experiences, both valuable. Being clear about the purpose of involving supporters and how this supports the voices of people with dementia is the key point. Another learning point is that co-production is always shaped by budget and timelines. And while this needs to be flexible, it can't be limitless. And working within these constraints is part of the reality of co-producing resources. Martin mentioned that I kept the group in line, which makes me sound a bit bossy, but that links back to an earlier point. Co-production doesn't just mean everyone has the same role. I led this particular project, and that was appropriate and well responded to by the group. Teams need leadership. What matters is bringing people with you, keeping them informed, and ensuring they feel genuinely involved. Having PPI co-leads can work really well. And finally, I just want to echo Martin's point about researcher support. This kind of work can be deeply inspiring and motivating, but it also can carry emotional weight. So things like balancing empathy with professionalism, managing people's expectations, and being flexible but staying focused and valuing people's contributions can be really challenging. Researchers do need space for reflection, peer support, and senior guidance, and I've included some useful reading on this in the resources at the end. Some takeaway recommendations. Ensure early involvement of people with lived experience from the start. Maintain strong communication and provide information in multiple formats for accessibility. Include in-person meetings where possible, especially at the beginning, to build trust and connection. Recognize and budget for costs associated with meaningful engagement of people with lived experience. And try to diversify participation by reaching beyond the same pool of individuals for PPI activities. Acknowledge contributions clearly in outputs to reinforce value and inclusion. And let's continue challenging assumptions about the capabilities of people with dementia. My last point is about communication as foundational, or the building blocks of good practice. Communication is sometimes described as a soft skill, which can make it seem secondary or instinctive. But if it were straightforward, people with dementia wouldn't continue to describe experiences of being sidelined or spoken for in PPI. In dementia research, communication determines whose voice is heard, how understanding is negotiated, and whether involvement is genuinely shared or just tokenistic. It's something we have to practice. We have to reflect on it and actively improve. especially by inviting feedback from the contributors themselves. Communication isn't a soft skill in dementia PPI, it's the infrastructure of involvement. In terms of next steps, we want to look at the impact of the resources. And in the future, there's also potential for an observational study of dementia research PPI encounters. It'd be great to do an in-depth examination of minute-by-minute communication, looking at things like pacing of talk, approaches to presenting information, types of questions that are asked, use of non-verbal communication and visual resources, and how PPI conversations unfold as a result of such actions. This could help inform a collection of resources supporting communication in dementia-related PPI work. We've started to share these resources through various channels, and if you have ideas about how and where this could be shared, do let us know. We'd also love your feedback on these resources so they can continue to be refined in the future. You can either email me with your general feedback on what you think of them and how they could be improved, or give it anonymous feedback. There's a link here for researchers, including students, and one for people with dementia and supporters and the general public. The questionnaire that you link to is really short. You can say as much or little as you like, and it will really help us enormously. These links are also being pasted in the chat along with the link to the resources. Here are some links to further information and reading. I won't go through them all now, but you'll have these when the slides are shared. And finally, just thanks for listening, and thanks to everyone who's been involved in this project.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for such a clear and engaging presentation. And do pass on our thanks to Martin as well for taking the time to share his reflections. What an amazing piece of work, and a huge amount achieved in such a small amount of time as well, with such important ethos throughout as well. We've had some positive words from Wayne in the chat saying that you were excellent throughout as well and made it inclusive, pleasurable, and a positive experience for all of us with dementia. So that's really nice to hear.
That's lovely. Thanks, Wayne.
I will open it up for any questions. I know it takes a little bit of time to think of a question. So if it's okay, I might ask one first. I'm just interested in this idea of building trust, and actually Martin reflected on this as well, and I think he mentioned the importance of building relationships, and you going up to Aberdeen to see him in person was obviously a very important part of that relationship building. I just wondered if you had any other examples or things that you've done previously to kind of build that trust in those relationships, and any advice you could offer for others wanting to take that maybe even initial contact and building those relationships.
Yeah, I think I wish that in like future funding applications, I'd built in more cost to visit people in person. Not everybody can attend like a first in-person meeting like we have for this project because of various challenges such as mobility difficulties. So to have that flexibility to actually go and visit somebody one-to-one is really valuable. And as we talk about in the guidance, just making sure that there's space for that sort of individual conversation with everybody, so that the first time you meet people, it's not in the group setting, that you've had a chance to just kind of meet them, find out more about them, and just importantly show them that you're a human being that's friendly and would be potentially nice to work with. So yeah, I think probably just placing more value on that, having that time for relationship building, and not being kind of hesitant to build that into funding applications as well.
Sarah, yeah, really important. We've got a couple of questions coming in through the chat. So one saying, I'm leading a study on dementia care advisory communication. The one issue I really struggle with is ethics committees and partner organizations' demands to use complex legal terminology in reference to things like GDPR to ensure we obtain full consent from participants and public involvement members, including those living with dementia. Do you have any suggestions around that?
I guess with PPI, you don't need to go through ethics unless you're going to be sort of using data from your PPI work and sort of writing it up as research. So that's not something we had to do for this particular project. But for those projects that do need to seek ethical approval, it's really important to kind of work with the ethics committees. And, actually, if you create resources that are really accessible for people with dementia, often ethics committees are really pleased to see those. So if you're kind of prepared to argue your case, if you've involved people with dementia in some PPI work to develop the ethics application, that's what ethics committees want to see. So I think it's kind of, in a way, sort of changing practice and expectations by doing it. And, gradually, in my experience, ethics committees have kind of got on board with that. So yeah, I think it's a kind of a battle that's not won, but something we need to chip away at and involve people with dementia in that as well.
Thanks, Sarah. A few more questions. A lot of people saying a great presentation. There's someone asked whether you could say a bit more about your recruitment strategy and whether you recruited any care home residents living with dementia. I guess, yeah, from an involvement perspective.
Yeah, no, we didn't for this particular project. That's something that I haven't actually done before, actually, is to recruit people from care homes. My main sort of research focus has been primary care up to now. We went through dementia organisations like DEEP. We used kind of existing contacts. I went through you as well, Hallie, to make sure the recruitment call went out to academics that were kind of PPI leads in departments in different universities. And, word of mouth and kind of snowballing to try and recruit people. If I was to do it again, I'd probably do it differently. I was looking back at our recruitment materials where we created a really colourful flyer. But I think kind of with the knowledge we have now about the project, I think we might change a lot of wording of that and just do things a little bit differently. We'd probably think harder about how to widen the pool of participants. As I was saying, I don't know how we do that at the moment. It's something we can sort of think more about, but I think part of that is the recruitment. And there might be potential here for another project on developing really accessible recruitment materials and how to go about that. That's a whole other area of communication and doing PPI that probably needs a separate project on its own. But yeah, something to think about.
Thanks, Sarah. The next question from Paul actually kind of follows on that theme of kind of widening the diversity of the group, and they've asked, have you given thought to inclusion of people with dementia who may not be able to communicate verbally? Are there any tips for involvement, such as maybe creative methods?
Yeah, that's a whole other area of research as well, but a linked area. I'm seeing more at the moment in terms of presentations like this around creative methods for involving people with more dementia, advanced dementia. It's not something that we've done for this project, but I agree, really, really important and something to look at. I'd be really interested to find out more myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of relates to what you said, Sarah, about having a bit of a peer support network for academics working in this area as well, and opportunities to share learning about what other people are doing and different methods and approaches that they've been using as well.
I think as well, this sort of, it's linked to the idea that we don't see PPI in terms of always taking place in a group meeting, and that it can be kind of a one-to-one thing about building a relationship with a person with sort of more advanced dementia, or somebody that uses more kind of non-verbal methods of communication, often that's achieved quite well in a one-to-one situation. So we just need to kind of get away from this idea of everybody sitting around a table doing PPI and being more creative in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question from Linda, which asks, when you have people with dementia on a group as well as their supporter, do you have any tips on how to ensure the supporter enables the person to speak, the person with dementia to speak, rather than speaking for them?
Yeah, I think this idea of making sure that you've met everybody before a meeting to talk about the reason for being in the PPI group is really important. People can understand the purpose of it and the fact that you want to hear perspectives of the person with dementia and supporters, and how that can be set up. I think that's really important. It's this idea of getting everybody on the same page, setting expectations with the group as a whole, thinking about meeting. If supporters are involved in the project, and there's a really good reason for them to be, and they don't necessarily need to be together with people with dementia, often it's a good idea to hold separate meetings for supporters, for people with dementia. But if supporters are needed to support the person with dementia with communication, it's really important to set up expectations from the beginning, and maybe have kind of different times for each to talk, and make it really clear when you want to hear the views of the person with dementia. People with dementia often say it's quite effective to just sort of say, I want to hear from the people with dementia first, and then sort of we'll go to supporters for what they think. So that's something that I try to do.
Thanks, Sarah. Just following on from that as well, I had one more question, and I wondered if you had any examples of being able to kind of utilize what you've learned through this project in your other areas of research, and how doing this has maybe changed your practice, or any kind of reflections on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really interesting through the project because I just had this kind of meta sense of the fact that we were developing guidance for the very thing that we were doing. So, during the workshops that we were doing for this project, sometimes I'd find myself doing something that didn't align with the best practice that we had just developed. So I would kind of make a joke about that, and perhaps if I was kind of sharing something via slides, and I suddenly had a realization like, oh, this has been going on a bit long, this screen sharing. We said not to do this. So I'd make a bit of a joke about that. But definitely, it's really, it's not the case at all that all of these tips and strategies are things that I've always embedded into my PPI work. I've learned a great deal from doing it as well, and will continue to do so. So yeah, none of us is 100% perfect, and we've always got new things to learn.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good point about kind of, none of us are perfect. It's always just having that sense of awareness, and thinking about what we're doing and maybe adapting our practice as we learn new things.
The number of times I said, oh, sorry, I'm doing that thing we said we mustn't do. But I think it's just talking about it and reflecting and asking for feedback is so important, because also it tells the people that you're working with that what they think is valuable, and their feedback is valuable. That's why you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got about 10 minutes left if anyone had any other questions that they wanted to ask. I was just going to ask Sarah, is there any kind of call to action for anyone on the call? We've got a nice group of people here. Is there anything you would like individuals to do around these resources?
First of all, it'd be really great to get people's feedback. We just want to see if people will engage with these resources, and send us your feedback, constructive feedback. We want to think about how these could be improved in the future. this can feed into future research projects, like I said, to ensure that as this expands, it could be even more evidence-based. So if this does lead to some sort of observational project, we can incorporate really specific strategies that we've seen work in practice. This project is valuable because it's based on the real experiences of people with dementia as they tell them to us. But to go another step further, being able to see things happening in practice is another layer of evidence. So it's not the end of the project. So that's a reason why we really want people's feedback. So everyone maybe on this call, if they could give us some feedback, tell us, how this kind of resource will impact on their work, and just carry on the conversation about how we improve communication in PPI and also how we diversify the pool of contributors. Feel free to email me as well to continue the conversation. But if I think of anything else, I will let you know.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And yeah, just a reminder that the links to the resources are in the chat if you wanted to go have a look again or share them with any colleagues as well. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. I will just leave it for a minute for any final thoughts or comments. But otherwise, just to say a huge thank you to you, Sarah. Thank you so much for taking the time to put together this presentation and for all your hard work on this project. And also do pass on our thanks to Martin as well for taking the time to share his reflections.
Will do.
We will share the slides, a link to the resources, which also has Sarah's contact details on it as well, if you did want to follow up with any further questions, or to maybe just have a chat in the future about this kind of area of activity. So yeah, thank you so much, and I will let everyone get on to the rest of their day. But huge thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.